heart of Appalachia, there are places even the boldest moonshiners and trappers refuse to tread. One such place is known as Black Hollow, a stretch of forest where the air hangs heavy, where birds fall silent, and where locals whisper the name Maddox with a kind of fear usually reserved for curses. To the unknowing traveler, the hollow might look like any other forgotten valley in the Appalachian spine, old trees leaning over narrow paths, creeks that cut into the shale, moss-choking fallen barns. But beneath that veneer of quiet beauty lies a history soaked in madness, blood, and the unholy practices of a family who seemed more beast than human. The Maddox Bloodline. What made them so feared was not just their isolation or their violence. Plenty of mountain families lived, cut off from society. But the Maddox Clan had gone further. They had turned away from God, away from neighbors, away from anything that resembled decency, and descended into rituals so obscene that those who claimed to have witnessed them could barely put words to their experiences. The most common phrase spoken about them was simple, almost childish in its terror. They aren't people anymore. The earliest whispers of the Maddoxes go back to the mid-1800s, when Elias Maddox, a Civil War deserter, led his kin into Black Hollow. He had fought on both sides of the war at different times, killing his commanding officers before disappearing into the wilderness with a handful of wives and children. Locals thought him mad, but his madness spread like rot. In the hollow, the family became a self-contained kingdom, marrying only within their blood, hunting outsiders who dared too close, and passing down the twisted teachings of Elias as though they were sacred scripture. By the turn of the century, the Maddox name was already a curse in nearby towns. Livestock went missing, hunters vanished, and sometimes bodies were found in shallow pits, mutilated in ways that didn't match animal attacks. One farmer claimed he found his missing hogs strung up in the trees like offerings, their entrails knotted into strange symbols. Another man swore that he stumbled upon a Maddox gathering in the woods, their pale figures dancing around a bonfire, chanting in some guttural tongue while blood dripped down their mouths. The sheriff's department attempted to intervene once. In 1912, a posse of 6 men rode into Black Hollow, armed with rifles and lanterns. They were never seen again. The horses returned days later, wandering the edge of the woods, saddles soaked with what looked like blood. After that, even law enforcement drew an invisible line. The hollow was Maddox land. No one went in. What happened inside was left to speculation. But there were occasional glimpses. Travelers who claimed to hear children's laughter echoing through the trees long after sundown, though no children lived nearby. Others said they saw figures lurking at the tree line, tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight. Some who wandered too close spoke of the smell, not the natural scent of decay, but the acrid reek of burning hair, coppery blood, and rancid meat. In time, the Maddoxes became less human in rumor and more monster. The kind of story parents used to keep children from wandering at night. But the danger was real enough that even seasoned hunters steered clear. For while most families in Appalachia survived on game and crops, the Maddoxes were said to thrive on flesh. Not deer, not bear, flesh of their own kind. Flesh of strangers who strayed too far. One of the most unsettling tales comes from 1937, when a traveling salesman vanished along the mountain road. His broken-down truck was found abandoned near the hollow, but the man himself was gone. Weeks later, hikers discovered a tree stump deep in the woods. On it were pieces of cloth, shredded into strips, and a ring still clinging to a severed finger. The sheriff at the time refused to comment, but privately, townsfolk whispered the Maddoxes had claimed another victim. What made them more terrifying was how they seemed to know the forest better than any man alive. People said they could move without sound, watching you from the trees before you ever realized you were being stalked. Some even believed they marked outsiders, scratching strange sigils into bark to guide them deeper into the hollow, like lures into a trap. And yet, no matter how far-fetched the stories became, there was always a chilling consistency. Victims disappeared, bodies were defiled, and no one who entered Maddox land came back whole. Whether the family's atrocities were ritualistic or simply barbaric hunger was impossible to know. What was certain was this: they were not merely surviving in isolation. They were building something, a culture, a religion, a reign of horror that spanned generations. To this day, old folks still whisper about the night you can hear the Maddoxes most clearly, when the moon turns red. Hunters and wanderers alike claim that on blood moons, distant howls echo from the hollow, not like wolves, not like men, but something in between. And if you're unlucky enough to follow the sound, you'll find yourself surrounded by pale figures, teeth bared, and realize too late that you've stepped into the kingdom of the most barbaric family Appalachia has ever known. Asterisk. The thing about Black Hollow is that it doesn't just frighten those who hear the stories. It changes the people who live near it. Ask anyone in the surrounding towns, and you'll notice a peculiar pattern. Every generation, there are fresh rumors, new encounters, strange disappearances. It's almost as if the Maddoxes aren't a family bound by time but a disease, something that infects the land itself. And by the 1940s, their horror had only grown stronger. World War II brought new roads, new industry, and outsiders passing through Appalachia. That meant more prey for the Maddox Clan. Truckers and drifters reported strange lights flickering deep in the trees. Military recruiters, searching for boys who hadn't registered for the draft, swore they heard chanting in the dark, voices rising and falling like a hymn, though no church was anywhere nearby. But what set the Maddoxes apart from every other barbaric clan was their obsession with ritual. They didn't kill for food alone. They killed for ceremony, and in their twisted worldview, every death was a sacrifice, every body part a relic. There are stories of shallow graves filled with bones, carved with runes, of skulls nailed to the rafters of abandoned cabins, and of crude wooden idols drenched in blood. One man, a surveyor named Henry Doyle, came dangerously close to uncovering them. In 1948, he was sent to map new land for coal mining companies. His notes, discovered in his satchel after he disappeared, were enough to terrify even hardened loggers. In them, Doyle described stumbling across a clearing where he found a circle of stones, blackened by fire, each one marked with what appeared to be handprints. He noted the bones scattered nearby weren't from deer or hogs, they were human. His last entry was short and scrawled, "I think they're watching me." Doyle was never seen again. Locals say his body was offered in a ceremony that night. They claim that the Maddoxes tied him to a wooden stake, skinned him alive while chanting their guttural language, then feasted on his flesh before dawn. The most chilling part of the legend is what happened after. His bones, bleached white, were said to have been arranged in a wheel shape at the clearing, a grotesque symbol of eternity. Hikers who've wandered near the hollow swear they've seen it, though few live long enough to tell their story. Another chilling tale comes from the 1960s, when two teenage brothers decided to test their courage by venturing into Black Hollow. Armed with only flashlights and knives, they disappeared for 3 nights. When one of them staggered out, bloodied and broken, his story horrified even the most skeptical townsfolk. He claimed that he and his brother were captured by pale men with long arms and teeth too sharp to be human. They were dragged into an underground cavern where the Maddox clan gathered, dozens of them, naked and covered in filth, surrounding a pit filled with bones. He said his brother was taken first, and he was forced to watch as the family tore into him, their howls echoing like animals feeding. The boy's final words before being institutionalized in an asylum were simple: "They don't die. They keep coming back." To this day, no one knows what he meant, whether it was a delirious rambling or a clue that the Maddox bloodline had found a way to cheat death. What terrifies researchers and folklorists most is the consistency of these reports. Year after year, decade after decade, The Maddoxes appear not just as killers, but as something beyond human. People describe their features with strange uniformity: tall, gaunt, with faces twisted by generations of inbreeding, eyes that catch the light in unnatural ways, glowing yellow or red, teeth filed into points. Some claim their bodies bear scars carved into intricate shapes, like they'd turned their own flesh into a canvas of worship. But perhaps the darkest theory is that the Maddox clan isn't merely a bloodline at all. It's a cult. Passed from parent to child isn't just genetic deformity, but a set of beliefs, teachings carried forward since Elias Maddox himself. In this view, every horrifying ritual is part of a larger doctrine, a faith built around flesh and blood, a belief that consuming the body gives them strength, longevity, even immortality. And as generations passed, they became less like men and more like the monsters their neighbors always feared. One of the most disturbing accounts came from a hunter named Samuel Price in 1979. He went missing for 4 days before stumbling into town, his clothes torn, his body covered in scratches. He claimed he had been chased through the woods by the Maddoxes, forced into their territory after a deer he shot ran into the hollow. He said they followed him for days, always just at the edge of his sight, gaunt shadows moving silently through the trees. On the final night, he awoke to find himself surrounded, dozens of them. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they whispered in unison, repeating his name over and over, like a chant. He said their voices sounded like many mouths, but only one will. A hive mind echoing through the dark. Price somehow escaped, though he never explained how. Some suspect he fabricated the tale. Others believe the Maddoxes let him go on purpose, knowing his story would spread, planting fear in the hearts of anyone who dared wander near Black Hollow. And if that's true, then their reign of terror isn't just survival, it's psychological warfare. By the 1980s, Black Hollow was a dead zone on every map. Hunters avoided it. Families forbade their children from even speaking the name Maddox. But despite that, the clan remained, watching, waiting, and feeding whenever they needed to. And the hollow, as if feeding on their horror, grew darker with each generation. The most unsettling part, no one knows how many of them exist today. Are there a dozen? 100? Some believe they've spread beyond the hollow, lurking in abandoned coal towns and ghost villages across Appalachia. Others insist the bloodline is stronger than ever, hidden deep underground, evolving in ways outsiders can't imagine. Whatever the truth is, one fact is inescapable. Every attempt to erase them, to hunt them, to destroy them, has failed. The Maddox family endures. And what's worse, the deeper you dig into their story, the more it feels less like folklore and more like a warning. Asterisk, the most terrifying part of the Maddox story isn't the past. It's what still lingers today. Because while most Appalachian horror lives in whispers of history, long-dead witches, lost miners, buried Civil War curses, the Maddox family is different. Their legacy hasn't faded. It adapts, it grows, and in the present day, there are encounters that suggest their barbaric reign is far from over. In 1996, 2 spelunkers entered a cave system near Black Hollow, hoping to map uncharted passages. They never returned. A rescue party found their gear abandoned near an underground chamber. But the strangest detail was carved into the limestone walls. Handprints, dozens of them, some small like children, some impossibly large, pressed into the rock as though burned into the surface. What unnerved rescuers most was the smell that clung to the cavern, acrid, metallic, and rotten, as if blood had seeped into the very stone. Around the same time, hikers began reporting strange figures at night, gaunt silhouettes standing silently at the tree line. One man claimed he followed a figure, believing it was a lost traveler, only to realize the man was walking on all fours, its limbs bending unnaturally, scuttling into the dark like an animal. The account was dismissed as hallucination, but months later, Another group of campers reported the same thing. Pale bodies moving spider-like across the forest floor, eyes gleaming as they circled the camp before vanishing without a sound. Locals began to speak of the watchers. Some believed these were Maddox descendants, their bodies warped by centuries of inbreeding and ritual mutilation. Others whispered something darker, that the Maddox clan had crossed a line long ago, merging with whatever dark force lived in Black Hollow, and what now roamed those woods weren't human at all. In 2003, a storm uncovered something even more unsettling. A mudslide along the hollow exposed what appeared to be an underground chamber, lined with wooden beams blackened by age. Inside were remnants of rituals spanning decades, bones arranged in spirals, jars filled with unrecognizable organs, and crude wooden dolls bound with human hair. But the most horrifying discovery wasn't the artifacts, it was the bones themselves. Some were ancient, brittle with time. Others, according to forensic analysis, were fresh, less than 5 years old. That meant the Maddox clan hadn't just survived into the 21st century. They were still active. Even law enforcement refuses to officially comment on the case. But privately, one officer admitted what many had long suspected. We've seen their work. We know they're out there. But you can't fight shadows. They're not just a family, they're a force. You cut one down, and another takes their place. This statement ties into the most disturbing theories surrounding the Maddox bloodline that they have found. A way to preserve themselves beyond natural death. Generations of inbreeding, cannibalistic rituals, and occult practices may have twisted their biology, giving them unnatural resilience. Witnesses who escaped describe wounds that should have been fatal, arrows through the chest, axes to the skull, yet the Maddoxes continued moving, continued hunting, as though pain itself meant nothing. Some folklorists argue that Elias Maddox, the founder of the bloodline, never truly died. They believe his remains were consumed by his children, passing his essence into their bodies. A ritual of eternal survival that continues to this day. In this way, the Maddoxes aren't simply descendants of Elias, they are Elias. Fragments of him spread across dozens of bodies, each generation carrying the original seed of madness forward. If that theory is true, then every new victim isn't just a meal, it's a sacrament. Fuel for something far older than Appalachia itself. One of the most chilling modern encounters came from 2015, when a group of urban explorers filmed themselves entering abandoned mines near the hollow. Their footage, uploaded online, is still debated today. At first, it shows nothing unusual: rusted carts, collapsed tunnels, graffiti. But 20 minutes into the video, a noise interrupts the explorers, a low guttural hum, like chanting. The camera shakes as they turn a corner, revealing what looks like dozens of figures standing in the dark, motionless. Their eyes catch the flashlight beams, reflecting unnaturally bright. The explorers scream, the camera falls, and the footage cuts to black. The men were never found. Skeptics call it a hoax. Believers insist it's proof that the Maddox clan is not only alive but thriving, guarding their domain with a cult-like unity. The fact that the video was swiftly removed from most platforms only fuels the conspiracy. And yet, what makes the Maddox bloodline so terrifying isn't just the violence or the cannibalism, it's the silence. Black Hollow remains off limits, not because of superstition, but because even the brave admit something lives there. Something that has outlasted wars, famines, law enforcement, and time itself. Something that feeds on the flesh of intruders, but also on the fear of those who know better than to enter. The truth of the Maddoxes may never be fully uncovered, but maybe that's by design. Maybe Elias Maddox's legacy was never meant to be understood by outsiders, only feared. What we do know is simple. Appalachia is filled with strange tales, but none linger like the Maddox bloodline. Their story is not a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing nightmare. And if you ever find yourself near Black Hollow, remember this: The silence of the woods is not safety. It is the sound of dozens of eyes, watching, waiting. The Maddox clan does not forgive trespassers. They do not let outsiders leave unmarked. And if you listen closely, when the wind dies, you might hear your own name whispered in the dark. The Maddoxes letting you know that you've already been chosen. Asterisk. The Maddox bloodline has endured for over a century, and some say they still walk among us in Black Hollow tonight. So tell me, would you dare step into their woods? Or would you run the other way? Drop your answer in the comments below. If you thought this story was disturbing, trust me, what I have for you next is even worse. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because the shadows of Appalachia hold horrors you won't want to miss. And remember, some families die out, but the Maddoxes, they're still waiting, and maybe they're already watching you.